Is sales leadership actually a promotion, or would you say it's a completely different career? According to research from CSO Insights, nearly 60% of first time sales managers fail within the first 2 years, often because they were promoted for performance and not necessarily for leadership readiness. Can great sellers actually become great leaders? And more importantly, should they?
Hey, welcome to the Sales Squad Pod, the show that breaks down the skills sellers need to crush quota and advance their career. Hosted by Lisa, a top enterprise AE, Sarita, a frontline leader, and Donna, a former leader of leaders. We met in the sales trenches at Salesforce. We're moms, we've carried a bag for decades, we've gone to club, and we've got you. If you're ready to up-level your game and career, let's jump into it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Sales Squad Pod. Sales is one of the few careers where the promotion everyone chases can also be the one that blindsides you the most. One day you're a top performer, closing deals, controlling your own destiny, living by your number. The next day you're responsible for an entire team's number, coaching people who used to be your peers and realizing that what made you a successful seller does not automatically make you a successful leader. And the truth is, almost no one prepares you for that transition. So if you're a top rep thinking about stepping into leadership, if you just got promoted and suddenly feel like you're figuring it out in real time, or if you're just managing former peers and wondering how to shift the dynamic from one of the team to the leader of the team, this episode is absolutely for you. Today, we're going to break down one of the hardest transitions in sales, going from individual contributor into sales leadership. I'm excited for this one. I think it's going to be a great one. So let's jump right into it. Is sales leadership actually a promotion, or would you say it's a completely different career?
I actually was a people leader at American Express leading a sales team, and I went back to becoming an individual contributor when I went to Salesforce. So I actually have done the transition twice now, going from an IC to a leader. I think the biggest transition for me the first time I became a leader was recognizing that the people on my team are not necessarily going to do the things the way that I would do the things. And acknowledging that allows you to take a step back and appreciate the fact that my approach is not the only way to achieve something, or my approach is not necessarily the way that they want to achieve the thing. And if you take that mindset and appreciate the value that individuals bring to the table, I think you will be off to the races and a much better leader. When I went from American Express to Salesforce and I went from leading a team to becoming a salesperson, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little. I think I was the best and easiest rep to manage because I had the empathy and appreciation and experience of what it's like to be a manager. So when I became a rep again, I was easy peasy. I knew what my manager needed. I knew that I needed to share what was going on, provide valuable, succinct updates when it matters, know when to escalate things. So I think that is why this topic is amazing. Even if you are not a leader or aspiring to be a leader, I think being an AE and having the empathy of what a leader goes through will be valuable if you make that transition or if you stay in your role.
What you said about the different folks on the team bringing different attributes to the team and not having everyone be exactly like you, because I've been on teams where my manager wants everyone to be little them. And I just feel like it kills the richness of the team and everybody's strengths when they just want a bunch of replicates.
Absolutely, especially because times are changing. How we sold back in the early 2000s is not the same as how we sell today. Yes, there are certainly some carryovers, but things are different now. For me, the most difficult part of making the transition from individual contributor into leadership was one, managing my calendar and realizing that my calendar essentially no longer belonged to me, it belonged to my team. And then the second part was catching myself trying not to jump into deals and do the deal myself and run the cycle myself.
Honestly, I didn't particularly struggle with getting in there and doing the job for them. Maybe because I'm lazy, I don't know. But that wasn't something that I myself struggled with. However, I have absolutely hired managers who struggle with this, and they become what I call super AE. It is very different to teach versus do. An AE can be amazing at what they do, but they can't necessarily articulate what it is that they're doing that is contributing to their success. And when that AE becomes a leader, they will struggle to teach their team the process that they need to follow and the steps they need to take. Because when you're doing things intuitively and you're just doing the things that feel right, that's really hard to share that intuition. And so that's where I see new managers fall into that trap where they can't actually articulate what they need to see because they themselves don't know how to articulate it.
Here's something interesting. Research from LinkedIn Talent Insights found that actually less than 30% of top sales performers actually want to move into management. They love the autonomy, the thrill of closing the deals, the direct connection between that effort and reward. And we know that sales leadership, on the other hand, often means potentially more meetings, less control over the outcomes, and really that pressure to manage those multiple personalities and performance levels. And historically, I would say leadership was the only way to advance in a sales career for many folk. They thought that that was the only way they could go. I recently promoted one of my account executives into solutions engineering, also promoted into sales development leadership as well. There are many different types of paths to take.
What you said really resonates with me around where to go next. Is it the next career level? Is it the only move that I can make that would progress my career? I think about that a lot. And right now in my career, I'm at the top. There's nowhere else to go. I'm the Strat Enterprise AE. And when I was at Salesforce, I was on a Fortune 10 company. So there is no other place to go in my mind other than leadership. But do I want to take that right now?
As someone who has obviously gone from AE to leadership to second line leadership, that is one path, but it certainly is not the only path. And I think it pains me because we really need tenured, experienced sellers. And just because you're at the top, it doesn't mean you can't switch to a different set of accounts, a different company, a different set of challenges, a different industry, and still actually be stretched and fulfilled. I have a mentee, and he is looking at going into leadership because he's like, well, what else do I do? I'm such and such age. Why would I still be a rep? Almost this ageism factor in his mind where he's feeling like he's aging out of the job. And I think that's really unfortunate. There's something to be said for customers when dealing with a very tenured and seasoned salesperson, and I would not knock it.
No, and I don't want it to come across as if I was doing that. I love my job and I'm going to stay here for as long as I can. When I think about what that next move is, to your point, Donna, yes, different company, different set of accounts, those things are all great, but they would all be considered lateral moves. When I think about what is going to be the next move up, that's more so what I'm referring to. But knocking the enterprise sales rep, I love this job. And to your point earlier, Sarita, the autonomy is there. I don't want to say the lack of responsibility, but I'm responsible for just my accounts. I'm not responsible for anybody else's number. It's just me. And there's a direct correlation between my efforts and my pay. There is something very beautiful about that system that I quite enjoy.
I think it's an important point to talk about is compensation. Yeah. Because when a deal closes, nobody will get paid more than the AE who closes that deal. So financially, when I was an AE and I was the number one AE in my division, I had compensation that was beyond the levels that I made in certain years as a leader. So if you blow it out of the water, you're actually going to make more as an AE than you will as a leader. So I think sometimes there's this misconception that you're leaving money on the table, but it's not always the case.
Donna, I took part in a webinar that you had put on about AEs going into leadership. And I remember you specifically saying, if compensation is one of the reasons that you want to move into leadership, it's not a good reason. And you should probably rethink what those reasons are for why you want to make that move. Because again, AEs can make a lot of money.
Yeah. And actually, the biggest reason I think one should go into leadership is if you are motivated by seeing others succeed, if you want to develop people and see others have their own success and you enjoy helping people navigate their career and problems, that is when leadership will be rewarding, because leadership is about the people you lead and not about you. It's not about your ego or the title or the recognition or the air quotes money. It's about the people you lead.
And there is something very rewarding in seeing the fruits of your labor in terms of what you've invested into these people and then how they've grown.
I think the perfect analogy is being a parent. We do not become parents for the money. That is certainly not the case. Just I can tell you how much it costs to put a kid in hockey if anyone's interested. But we don't do it for the money. We are doing it for the growth that we see in our children, that reward that we get when we see them learn something for the first time, when we feel like we are having contributions to their outcomes and their success. There is a very real and meaningful feeling that brings, and I feel that in leadership. My job is not to do their job, the job of 7 people plus my own. My job is to make them better than if they were doing it on their own. So how can I help them reach their full potential? And then that means I'm doing my job as a leader.
Which is a great segue, because your analogy around being a parent, sometimes it's very hard to let go. It's very hard to just let them make the mistakes, let them grow up themselves, and make sure that they understand that while you're there to help, that they should not be depending solely on you in any situation. I think it's interesting that the analogy there, because the goal of leadership really isn't about closing the deal, as you mentioned. It's about building the reps who can close the deals without you. But they should feel empowered to know that they can do it. And how do you figure out, in a leadership standpoint, how to get your team to feel that way and to know that they can do it? My first experience when I was stepping from individual contributor into leadership, I went from an AE into a BDR manager. And the biggest part for me was, why am I just not picking up the phone if they're not calling? I can make up the gap that I'm seeing. I can pick up the phone and make the calls. And it was only through a lot of coaching, through my leadership, that I was able to really understand the why.
I myself have done that. When I first became a leader, I had an individual that I hired from an external company, external industry, who was very new to what we were selling. And I felt really responsible to ramp this person up very quickly. And so in the beginning, I actually joined all the calls. When the call was happening and it was going off the rails, I would jump in, I would save the day. Afterwards, we would debrief and I would share what I think went wrong. And I was very hands-on, thinking I was modeling the right behavior. But in fact, what I was doing was I was creating reliance and dependency on me. And over time, this person continued actually to become increasingly reliant. And I started to question, wait a minute, is this the right person for the job? Did I make a bad hire? And I started thinking about, maybe I need to exit this person from the business. And I ended up changing roles. And that person actually went to President's Club under a different leader. This person had the same territory, same job, same role, and thrived. Maybe it was me and not that person after all. It had nothing to do with that person. It was because I wasn't necessarily bringing the best out of them. So I think absolutely we've all done this, and it's very, very common to fall into that trap.
Love that. I think it's tough because obviously it's unintentional, right? You're unintentionally training, a rep or a team to potentially depend on you, where you need to teach a man to fish, right? Lisa, I would love to hear from you a little bit more about maybe how this feels on the receiving end.
A gentleman who it was his first role into management after being a stellar AE. And I loved that he was coaching me, but I think I might have turned into the guy that Donna was coaching as well. At the beginning, he jumped into all of my calls, which he should have, right? I didn't have like a trail guide or whatever the person is who is teaching you. He jumped into all of my calls. I was so grateful because it was my first time selling SaaS, and he taught me so much. But then there came a time where I started just adding him to all of my calls. He was my super AE. And I relied on him a lot. There's times where a customer would ask a question and I would kind of stay quiet and wait for him to answer. And we closed a lot of deals together, but I didn't learn. And so it wasn't until, to your point, Donna, that I was no longer on his team that my sales career and sales acumen really did take off. So I've been on the other side. I've been that guy, Donna.
That transition from telling somebody what to do or how to do things into coaching is one of the biggest shifts as you move into leadership. For me, it was about realizing that great coaching is not actually about giving the answers. It was really, and it continues to be about letting the reps find the answers themselves, but potentially through some of the questions that I ask. So instead of me saying, here's what I would do, or here's how I did it, I think they get like the cringy ears when they hear me say, here's when back in my day when I was selling, this is what I used to do. I like to ask different types of questions. I like to ask, what do you think the real blocker is? How do you think that call went? Before I even start on my rant, because at some point I do have to give my perspective and my point of view, I want to make sure that I'm asking the right questions to begin with. So that coaching really builds, I think, that decision-making ability that we're looking for and not the dependency. Donna, I wanted to ask you, what makes a great leader? And how do you pick them out of the crowd?
There are three things that I look for when hiring a sales manager. Number one, I'm looking for someone who has operational effectiveness. Number two, someone who has the proven ability to drive results. And three, someone who is able to build a very strong team culture. And what I mean by operational effectiveness is someone who has a process, someone who has a system and can teach their team how to go through the rigor of a deal cycle and understands the steps to success. Number two, with respects to driving ACV or closing revenue, someone who has been able to demonstrate their ability to close deals. The third piece of culture is actually the most important for me and what I'm looking for when I'm hiring a leader. The reason is I think you can teach the ability to close deals. You can teach someone to be better at operational process, but it is much harder to teach someone to be a leader that people want to follow, to be a nice person, to be empathetic, to have strong EQ. So for me, if I was going to stack rank them, absolutely, I want someone is going to be able to foster a great team culture. The easiest way for me to figure out if a person is going to be a great leader is just speak to their former direct reports. However, oftentimes I'm hiring leaders who have never actually led a team before. And that's when I actually ask them, have you mentored anyone? And if so, let me talk to those people. And that is why it is so important for AEs to actually have mentees that they're working with. And I'm not just talking about a once in a while coffee chat. I'm talking about a regular cadence you create with someone who is 3, 4, 5 years behind you in their journey, and you are invested in their success. And you meet with them on a regular cadence. You bring deals that you're working on together. Perhaps they bring one they're working on. You share something you're working on. But you develop a strong working relationship where you're actually demonstrating you can coach them through problems and challenges. So for me, if you're not doing that today, start. Because regardless of if you want to be in leadership in the future, it helps you figure out, do I even like these kinds of conversations? It's a testing ground for you to figure out if this is the right role for you.
Donna, that's huge, because even as I'm listening to it, my mind is pinging because I'm like, I don't have anything formalized and I have no problems doing it, but I've never even thought to say, who needs a mentor? Like, it just sounds so ridiculous to me to put that out there, and no one has come to me. But we work virtually. I don't think anybody on Sarita's old BDR team even knows I exist. How would you recommend for someone to start that process?
The reality is, for every manager, the thing that is the most scarce is time. We don't have enough time. And so if I have an AE who's willing to put their hand up and say, I would like to mentor others, as long as you actually know what you're doing and you're able to do your day job, I would be delighted. Absolutely. Let me help you connect with others who need your help. I think it is not up to our manager to identify that we want a mentee. It's up to us to raise our hand and say, I have the bandwidth and I have the desire to be a mentee. Sometimes these things happen organically. Chat to someone, you recognize that there's a fit there. Sometimes you need to have a bit more formal structure, and you can ask your manager, is there someone in the organization who would benefit from my experience and expertise? And I guarantee you there are. There are. People are not raising their hands for this stuff. They're so focused on themselves and just getting to their number. They're not thinking about the bigger picture and the impact that they can have on the broader organization.
And also check to see if there's existing programs. I know there are a lot of programs out there within organizations that are typically what you refer to as AE on deck, what's a BDR looking to go into AE, or that transition, or career panels. There are a lot of ways to kind of get the conversation going. It could also happen organically. I like this question because one of my reps on my team had a very similar question for me. Who can I get in front of? I would love to mentor someone. And I literally told her, just check the SDR, BDR org. Whenever you're receiving leads from the SDRs or BDRs, give them feedback. As you continue to start giving them feedback, they will start yearning for it and asking you more for it. And slowly it will become a natural progression into a mentor-mentee type of relationship. And you can be the one to take the reins and say, hey, listen, if you would like to meet once a quarter, once a month, happy to provide my time. So I love that. I hope the listeners who are out there take the tips. So I think it's a great, great way to get those mentors and mentees started and to think about what leadership could potentially look like for you. I would say another hidden challenge of leadership is actually managing people who used to be your peers. Now, this hasn't happened to me, knock on wood, but I do know that it can be a very awkward dynamic because the relationships change overnight. You go from complaining about pipeline together, complaining about the manager together, celebrating the deals and leaning on each other for many, many things, to suddenly now having to deliver performance feedback, holding these same people accountable, and even making compensation decisions about your friend, maybe. And so the pressure comes into play.
This absolutely has happened to me, Sarita. I had the privilege of being promoted from AE to RVP, so first line leader, and I essentially started leading the team that I was previously a part of. So my peers instantly became my direct reports. I had already led before. I was a leader in my previous life, went back to being an individual contributor, and then got promoted. I think allowed me a soft landing ground in the sense that I knew what I was stepping into. The first thing I always do, regardless of if I am managing my peers and friends or not, is I have a listening tour where I speak to every individual on the team and I ask them, what is going well for you? What is the challenge? And what are some things you'd like to see as part of the team? I ask every individual, what are the biggest challenges you see? What's going very well? And what do you want to see change? And I capture all this information and I will actually share it back with the entire team. And I said, this is what I'm hearing. Here are the patterns. Here are the trends. And also here's my 30, 60, 90-day plan. And I have in a QBR, when I ask the team to self-rate themselves on where they are on their territory plan, I will bring up that 30, 60, 90, and I will rate myself. How am I doing against the things that I said I would do in the beginning? I think creating that trust in the beginning is incredibly important. It allows the team to understand where I'm coming from, what my mindset is, and it really fosters a better relationship. Specifically when it comes to managing peers, I just have been really lucky. In that situation where I was managing my friends, I was so lucky that they had the business maturity, that they had the respect to understand the boundaries that were new for us and respect those. And we had a wonderful relationship because we had a foundation already built on trust. They respected me. And when I went into leadership, I didn't become a different person. I was the same person that they knew when we were peers, but the boundaries were just slightly different. So I've never had a bad experience leading my friends and peers. I know there absolutely are negative consequences of this, but my experiences have been incredibly positive.
Building the trust and building the credibility at the top end of the relationship as you make the transition is the key here. It's really important that people making that transition really understand that, yes, it's going to be difficult. Yes, it's going to be different. The dynamic is completely different, but you absolutely can do it. And building the foundation with the trust and credibility is the way to kick things off in a relationship.
I love working for a leader, and it excites me when somebody has a very different skill set than I do. So I love that they bring different angles into the conversations that I'm having with my customers. And I always just like to pick their brain to say, okay, these are the things that I've tried. Like, what do I not see? When I think about what worries me, it's the person who they've just got into leadership and they have something to prove. I know that happens. Everybody has something to prove. It's when they come in, they don't develop that trust that Donna was speaking about. They don't do that listening tour. And they're like, here's the new regime. You know, this needs to be done. This needs to be done. These are the things that you're not doing today. I think it just rubs people the wrong way. And it also tells me their maturity level and EQ moving into that role.
Donna, one great trait that every sales leader must have and one thing that they must leave behind.
For me, EQ is absolutely paramount, and Lisa said it herself. Specifically, self awareness. But self awareness is incredibly difficult. We think we are self aware, but we are not. And I think self awareness, empathy, active listening, this ability to connect with other people is 100% a mandatory trait of sales leaders or leaders in general. Those are all traits that leaders must have. In terms of what they need to leave behind, ego, go away, leave it at the door. If you are in this job because you want a title or access or accolades, do not even apply for my team. I just have never thrived under leadership where they want to take the credit, where their voice is the loudest in the room. The analogy that I use for leadership is it's like in the movie Star Wars. The hero of this story is Luke Skywalker. Leaders, we're Yoda, the funny looking green dude. We are the ones that are advising and helping guide the hero through the story. We are not the heroes here. And I think the sooner you recognize that as a leader, the better you will be for not only your ability to connect with your team, but also your ability to feel fulfillment out of that role. Because that's where you're going to get the fulfillment, is watching others succeed.
And it's a great way for us to close out today's episode. One of the biggest myths we can see is that sales leadership isn't necessarily the only next step that is out there for you. There are so many paths that you can think about. The reality is that leadership isn't necessarily a promotion, can actually feel more like a career change, because you suddenly start to realize that you're no longer measuring success by the deals that you're closing. You're measuring it actually by the people that you're developing around you. And you have to understand that instead of being the hero, you're building the heroes. And for any top sellers out there considering making the move, it's really worth asking yourself that very honest question. Do I want to close deals, or do I want to build people who actually close them? Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Sales Squad Pod. We're building a community of serious sellers and leaders who want to operate at the next level, and we're glad you're part of it. If you found value in today's conversation, we would love to hear from you. Send us questions you'd like us to tackle in future episodes, and whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify, be sure to hit like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube at Sales Squad Pod.